He watched the scene on the small, high-resolution monitor in his car, a silent, grayscale horror film playing out in real time. His daughter, Lily, stood alone in the schoolyard, a fragile ghost against the harsh brick wall. Other children, vibrant and loud, formed a cruel circle around a space she could not enter. One boy, emboldened by the pack, mimicked her slight, unsteady gait, a limp that was the lingering shadow of her long illness. The laughter was a knife, and Richard Sterling, a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets with a single word, could do nothing but clench the supple leather of the steering wheel until his knuckles turned bone white. He could buy the school, he could fire the principal, he could ruin the mocking child's family with a phone call, but he could not, for all his power, erase the pain from his daughter's face. What he did not know was that a different kind of power, a different kind of father, was about to step onto the stage. This is not just a story about a sick little girl, it is the story of how a man who lived in a world of spreadsheets and stock prices learned the true meaning of wealth from a humble circus performer who had nothing but love, and who, to bring back one child's smile, would end up changing an entire town forever. Leo Vance understood the physics of joy. He knew that a smile was a matter of lift, of defying the gravity of sadness. He lived this principle every day in a world that felt perpetually off balance. His home was a vintage Airstream trailer, polished to a dull gleam, parked in a grassy field at the edge of the small town of Oakhaven. It was the last remnant of the once grand Vance family circus, a legacy of sawdust and starlight that now fit into a single, cramped living space. At 42, his face was a roadmap of a life lived outdoors, etched with fine lines around kind, perceptive eyes the color of a summer sky. His hands were calloused and strong, equally capable of juggling flaming torches, mending a torn costume, or gently braiding his daughter Maya's hair. The great tragedy of his life, aside from the slow, painful decline of his family's profession, was the loss of his wife, Isabella, a brilliant trapeze artist who had seemed more at home in the air than on the ground. She had been the heart of their circus, the sun around which their small troupe orbited. A fall, not from the high wire but from a simple stepladder in their barn, had taken her from them 5 years prior, leaving a void that Leo filled with a quiet, fierce dedication to their daughter. Maya, now 8 years old, had her mother's raven hair and her father's resilient spirit. She was the center of his universe, the sole audience for whom his performance truly mattered. Every morning, Leo would practice in the field beside their trailer. He moved with a liquid grace that belied his age, his body a finely tuned instrument. He juggled, not just balls, but rings, clubs, and sometimes, just to make Maya laugh, apples that he would catch and core in a single, fluid motion. He practiced acrobatics on a worn mat, his movements precise and controlled, a silent ballet against the rising sun. This was not for a paying crowd, there were no paying crowds anymore. This was an act of faith, a daily ritual to keep his skills sharp and his spirit from rusting. He was the keeper of a forgotten magic, a master of an art form the world had largely left behind. His world was small, but it was rich with love, discipline, and a profound understanding that the most valuable things in life were not things at all. Richard Sterling's world, in contrast, was built of things. Expensive, gleaming, quantifiable things. His office was a glass-walled cage on the 50th floor of the Sterling Industries Tower, offering a panoramic, godlike view of the sprawling city below. At 45, he was sharp, angular, and impeccably dressed in bespoke suits that cost more than Leo Vance's entire trailer. His movements were efficient, his words were clipped, and his decisions were guided by data and logic. He was a titan of industry, a man whose name was synonymous with success and ruthless efficiency. But his success was a fortress built around an immense emptiness. His home, a sprawling minimalist mansion in the most exclusive suburb of Oakhaven, was less a home than a museum. It was silent, sterile, and cold. The grand halls echoed with the memory of his wife, Eleanor, who had lost a long, brutal battle with a rare autoimmune disease 3 years ago. It was the same insidious illness that now held their daughter, Lily, in its grip. Eleanor's death had not broken Richard, it had calcified him. He had treated her illness like a hostile takeover, throwing money and the world's best specialists at it, only to be met with the one variable he could not control, fate. Now, he applied the same flawed methodology to Lily. His love was expressed through a regimen of doctors, therapists, and tutors. He managed her condition, he did not nurture her spirit. Lily, a pale and delicate child of 8, was withering under the weight of his clinical affection. She was a project to be solved, a problem to be managed. He saw her fragility, her loneliness, her pain, but he believed the solution lay in better medicine, more advanced therapies, a more controlled environment. He was a master of control, yet the one thing he wanted most, his daughter's happiness, was slipping through his powerful fingers like fine sand. His life was a testament to the fact that a man could own the world and still be bankrupt in the ways that truly mattered. The two Fathers' worlds collided in the sterile, beige office of the Oakhaven Elementary School principal. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Richard sat stiffly in a chair that seemed too small for him, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the worn linoleum floor. Across from him, Leo Vance sat quietly, his posture relaxed but attentive, his faded denim jacket and work boots a silent statement of a different reality. Between them sat Principal Thompson, a nervous man out of his depth. Richard spoke first, his voice sharp and cold, the voice he used to dissect failing departments. My daughter was ridiculed. Publicly. Your staff stood by and did nothing. This is unacceptable. Principal Thompson stammered, Mr. Sterling, we are addressing the issue with the students involved. Addressing it is not enough, Richard cut in. I want a protocol. A zero-tolerance policy with tangible consequences. I've already had my assistant draft a proposal. He slid a leather-bound folder across the table. Leo finally spoke, his voice calm and steady, a gentle counterpoint to Richard's metallic tone. My daughter, Maya, saw what happened. She said Lily was just standing by herself, watching the clouds. He looked directly at Richard. She said Lily looked lonely. Richard's gaze flickered towards Leo, a flash of irritation in his eyes. He saw a man from the fringes, a carny, someone who had no standing in this conversation. He dismissed the observation entirely. Loneliness is a symptom. The disease is her physical limitation, and the problem is the school's failure to protect a vulnerable student. With respect, Leo said, leaning forward slightly, his calloused hands resting on his knees, sometimes the problem isn't the thing you can see. Sometimes a child just needs to feel magic. To be reminded that the world can be a wonderful place. A dry, humorless chuckle escaped Richard's lips. It was a sound of pure condescension. Magic, he repeated, as if the word were a foreign object in his mouth. I appreciate your folksy wisdom, Mr. Vance. But I will be dealing with this through concrete, actionable solutions. Not magic. He stood up, towering over the table. He gave Leo a final, dismissive glance that took in the worn clothes and the simple, earnest face, and saw nothing of value. The gesture was a small, quiet act of humiliation, a clear delineation of their separate worlds. He believed he was leaving the meeting to solve a problem. In reality, he was leaving the only man who held the solution behind. Days turned into a week, and Richard's concrete, actionable solutions yielded nothing. The bullies were given detention. The teachers were given a memo. A new anti-bullying poster was tacked to the school's bulletin board. And Lily withdrew even further into her silent world. She stopped talking about her day. She moved through their large, empty house like a whisper, her presence felt more as an absence than a reality. Richard's frustration grew into a cold, gnawing anxiety. His power, his entire identity, was predicated on his ability to effect change, yet his own daughter was drifting away from him, and he was helpless to stop it. He found himself thinking about the circus performer's words. Sometimes a child just needs to feel magic. The thought was absurd, an irritating jingle he could not get out of his head. Driven by a desperation he would never admit to, he did something utterly out of character. One afternoon, instead of driving home, he took a detour, his gleaming black sedan a foreign invader on the unpaved road that led to the edge of town. He parked a distance away, behind a stand of overgrown oak trees, and watched. There, in the golden light of the setting sun, was a world he could not have imagined. Leo Vance was not just a father, he was a maestro of joy. He was juggling a cascade of shimmering rings, his movements so fluid they seemed to defy gravity. A small group of children, including his daughter Maya, sat cross-legged on the grass, their faces wrapped with wonder. Richard saw Leo's small troupe, a wiry acrobat and a woman with a kind face and an accordion, practicing routines. But it was more than practice. It was a community. There was laughter, encouragement, and a palpable sense of shared purpose. He watched as Leo finished his juggling, bowed with a flourish, and then sat among the children, patiently teaching them a simple sleight-of-hand trick with a coin. Richard saw his daughter, Maya, expertly perform the trick and then beam with pride as her father hugged her. It was a display of simple, profound connection that felt more real and more valuable than anything in Richard's meticulously curated life. Intrigued and unsettled, Richard returned to his office and did what he did best: he initiated an investigation. He had his security team run a background check on Leo Vance. The report that landed on his desk the next morning stunned him. The Vances were not just carnies. The Vance family circus had been a celebrated European-style artistic circus, renowned for its theatricality and skill for 3 generations. They had performed for royalty, sold out arenas, and were pioneers of a narrative, character-driven style of performance. The file contained faded photographs of Leo's parents, graceful and proud in the center ring, and even a picture of a young Leo, no older than 10, perfectly balanced on a high wire. The decline began after a fire destroyed their big top and equipment, followed by the tragic death of Leo's father during a performance. Leo had tried to keep it going, but the world had moved on. He was not a failure, he was the last guardian of a fallen kingdom. The file laid bare a history of artistry, dignity, and resilience that Richard's initial judgment had completely missed. He had dismissed a king living in quiet exile. The crisis reached its apex on a cold Monday morning. Lily refused to get out of bed. Her eyes, usually just sad, were vacant. She did not respond when Richard spoke her name. He called her specialist, a man at the top of his field, who arrived and ran a series of tests. The diagnosis was devastating in its simplicity. There was nothing physically new to treat. Her body was stable. Her spirit, however, was giving up. It was a profound psychosomatic depression, a retreat from a world that had offered her more pain than joy. The doctor's final words echoed in the cavernous silence of the mansion: "Mr. Sterling, I can prescribe medication. But I cannot prescribe a reason to live. You need to find a way to reach her." All of Richard's resources, his entire empire of wealth and influence, had failed. His experts were baffled. His money was worthless paper. He was standing on the precipice of losing his daughter, not to the illness that ravaged her body, but to the despair that had conquered her soul. In that moment of absolute desperation, his pride crumbled to dust. He thought of Leo Vance, of the laughter in that sunlit field, of the simple magic of a father's love. He knew what he had to do. He drove back to the unpaved road, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. He got out of his car and walked across the damp grass to the Airstream trailer. He knocked on the metal door, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet evening. Leo opened it, his expression shifting from surprise to cautious concern as he recognized his visitor. Richard Sterling, the titan of industry, stood on the humble doorstep of the circus performer and felt his throat tighten. The words did not come easily. "Mr. Vance," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I was wrong. I was arrogant. And now I am desperate." He looked past Leo and saw Maya inside, reading a book, safe and happy in her small, bright world. "My daughter is fading. The doctors can do nothing. You spoke of magic. He finally met Leo's gaze, his own eyes pleading. I don't know what to do. My daughter has lost her smile. Please, can you help me? It was the humblest plea he had ever made, a complete surrender of the power he had always held so dear. It was an admission that his world had failed, and he needed a miracle from a world he had so carelessly scorned. Leo listened, his expression softening from caution to deep, genuine empathy. He did not gloat. He did not say, I told you so. He simply saw a terrified father, stripped of all his pretense, and nodded slowly. A smile is a heavy thing to lift alone, he said softly. But it is not impossible. I have an idea. It's a little unorthodox. I don't care, Richard said immediately. Anything. Then we will bring the circus to her, Leo declared, a spark of creative fire igniting in his eyes. We will bring it to the school. The plan was met with predictable resistance. Principal Thompson was horrified at the thought of turning his schoolyard into a circus ring. It's a liability. It's a disruption. It's undignified, he sputtered during a frantic phone call. But this was a new Richard Sterling. The dismissive, arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a father on a mission. Mr. Thompson, Richard said, his voice calm but infused with an unbreakable iron will. This will happen. My foundation will cover all insurance and liability. You will consider it a school-wide assembly on the creative arts. Send out a notice to the parents. I will handle any and all objections. The principal, accustomed to obeying the town's most powerful benefactor, quickly acquiesced. The day arrived, bright and clear. An unusual buzz of excitement and confusion filled the school. The children were led out to the large athletic field behind the building, where something extraordinary was taking place. Leo Vance and his small troupe were there, not as parents, but as performers. They had set up a small, colorful ring marked by velvet ropes. The woman with the accordion, whose name was Sophia, played a whimsical, jaunty tune. The wiry acrobat, Marco, warmed up with a series of effortless backflips that drew gasps from the students. Richard stood at the edge of the field, his daughter Lily beside him. She was bundled in a warm coat, her expression as blank as ever. He had carried her from the car, her body listless in his arms. The children who had once mocked her now stared, their cruelty forgotten in the face of this strange and wonderful spectacle. The skeptical teachers, including the one who had watched Lily's torment, stood with their arms crossed, their faces a mixture of disapproval and grudging curiosity. Then Leo stepped into the center of the ring. He wore a simple but elegant vest over a white shirt, a performer's costume that transformed him from a quiet handyman into the ringmaster of this small universe of wonder. He did not speak. He simply began to juggle. He started with 3 silver balls, then 5, then 7, a shimmering cascade that seemed to hang in the air around him. The children fell silent, mesmerized. He moved on to rings, which he sent soaring into the sky, where they caught the sun like halos. The performance was a story told without words. Marco, the acrobat, became a mischievous sprite, tumbling and leaping as if gravity were merely a suggestion. Sophia's accordion provided the soundtrack, shifting from joyful to melancholic and back again. Leo performed feats of balance, of sleight of hand, of pure, unadulterated skill. He was not just a performer, he was a conduit for joy. He was showing these children, and more importantly, the adults, a different kind of power, the power to create wonder out of thin air. For the finale, Leo walked slowly to the edge of the ring, right where Richard stood with Lily. He knelt down, so his eyes were level with the little girl's. He said nothing to her, but instead produced a single, vibrant red silk scarf from his palm. He let it dance in the air for a moment before making it vanish. Then, with a gentle smile, he reached behind Lily's ear and, with a flourish, pulled the red scarf from the empty space. He held it out to her. For a long moment, Lily did not move. The entire school seemed to hold its breath. Richard felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Then, slowly, as if waking from a long dream, Lily's small hand reached out and took the silk scarf. She looked at it, then up at Leo's kind face. And then it happened. A tiny tremor started at the corners of her mouth. It grew, pushing back the shadows, until it blossomed into a full, radiant smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated delight. A small giggle escaped her lips, a sound Richard had not heard in over a year. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. The field erupted. The children burst into spontaneous, thunderous applause. The teachers were clapping, their skepticism melted away by the undeniable warmth of the moment. Richard knelt beside his daughter, tears streaming freely down his face, and pulled her into a hug, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. He looked up and met Leo's gaze across the field. In front of the entire school, in front of the people who had judged and dismissed him, Richard Sterling stood up, holding his daughter's hand. "Thank you," he called out, his voice thick but clear for all to hear. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. You brought my daughter back. You reminded all of us what truly matters." It was a public proclamation, a full and complete vindication of the man he had once scorned. The circus performer had not just brought back a smile, he had healed a community with a spectacle of pure, heartfelt magic. In the aftermath of the performance, the atmosphere in Oakhaven shifted. The story of the circus in the schoolyard became a local legend, a touchstone of community spirit. Children who had once been cliquey and cruel were now friendlier, bonded by the shared memory of wonder. The school started a small, circus arts club, taught by Marco and Sophia. The change was real and tangible. A week later, Richard invited Leo to his office. The contrast between the two men was as stark as ever, but the dynamic had been irrevocably altered. They were no longer a CEO and a carny, they were two fathers, united by a common purpose. "I want to offer you a position," Richard began, his tone formal but laced with a newfound humility. "Head of corporate events for Sterling Industries. You would create experiences, performances, morale-boosting events. The salary would be substantial. You could buy a house, a real one. You would never have to worry about money again." He slid a contract across the vast mahogany desk, a document promising a life of security and luxury. Leo looked at the contract but did not touch it. He smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "Mr. Sterling. Richard. I appreciate this more than you know. But my life isn't about morale-boosting events for corporations. It's about what we did at that school. It's about reaching the one child in the back who feels invisible." He finally pushed the contract gently back across the desk. "But I have a counter-proposal." Richard leaned forward, intrigued. "I'm listening." "Your daughter is named Lily." "My daughter is Maya," Leo said. "Let's use your resources and my skills to start something real. The Lily and Maya Foundation for Joy. We won't just perform at schools. We'll go to hospitals, to community centers, to orphanages. We will use the circus arts not for entertainment, but for therapy. To bring light to places that have gone dark. We can train others, create a new generation of performers who understand that their real job is to heal." Richard stared at him, a sense of awe dawning on his face. Leo was not just declining a lucrative job, he was offering a partnership built on purpose, not profit. He was asking Richard to invest not just his money, but his heart. In that moment, Richard's transformation was complete. The ruthless CEO saw the flaw in his own offer, and the profound wisdom in Leo's. "Yes," Richard said, a genuine, warm smile spreading across his face. "Yes, that is a much better idea." And so, a new partnership was born. The Sterling Industries boardroom was soon filled with storyboards of circus routines and blueprints for a community arts center, not corporate expansion plans. Richard, the master of logistics and finance, worked tirelessly to build the foundation structure, while Leo, the creative soul, designed its programs. Lily and Maya, now inseparable best friends, became the Foundation's first and most enthusiastic students, their laughter a constant presence in the once silent Sterling mansion. Months turned into a year. The Lily and Maya Foundation became a beacon of hope. A vibrant new community center, complete with a small practice circus ring, was built on the very field where Leo's trailer once stood alone. Children from all walks of life, including the very boys who had once mocked Lily, learned to juggle, to walk on stilts, to find their balance in a world that often felt unsteady. They learned to trust, to cooperate, and to create joy for others. The Foundation's troops traveled the country, their performances in sterile hospital wards and underfunded community halls leaving trails of laughter and wonder in their wake. Richard was no longer just a CEO. He spent more time at the Foundation than he did in his skyscraper office. He learned the names of all the children in the program. He even learned a simple card trick, which he would perform with a clumsy earnestness that always made Lily and Maya dissolve into giggles. He was a father first, a philanthropist second, and a businessman a distant third. He had discovered a wealth that could not be traded on any stock exchange. One crisp autumn evening, Richard and Leo stood together watching their daughters practice a simple acrobatic routine in the new center. Lily, once fragile and unsteady, was now strong and confident. She moved with a grace that was a testament to her recovery. As she and Maya completed their routine with a shared, triumphant bow, the two fathers looked at each other and smiled. They had come from different worlds, one of steel and glass, the other of sawdust and canvas, but they had found common ground in the simple, powerful language of a father's love. They had learned that the greatest performance is not the one that earns the loudest applause, but the one that brings back a single, precious smile. And so we see that a person's true worth is not measured by the height of their office or the size of their bank account, but by the size of their heart. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the greatest solutions to our most profound problems come not from power or wealth, but from the most unexpected places, from a kind word, a selfless act, and the simple, enduring magic of human connection. The story of Leo and Richard teaches us to look past the surface, to see the king in the pauper and the potential for grace in everyone we meet. Have you ever underestimated someone, only to be surprised by their hidden depths? Share this story if you believe that a little bit of magic and a lot of love can truly change the world.